when every hand was needed.
Well, this is the middle of the Victorian age.
Right.
So women are modest.
That's
right?
true.
Women are modest, supposed to be retiring. They're not supposed to be able to handle this jarring emotional problems that come with a field hospital, with battle. How do they manage? I guess I'm saying this obviously sarcastically.
You're setting it up.
Yeah. Yeah. How do they manage to expand their role, or the way people perceive them, to take over these kinds of systems and run them?
Well, it's a complicated thing. Certainly there are women. I mean, you see in Gone with the Wind, which is fictional, but Margaret Mitchell interviewed Civil War veterans. Scarlett just has a hissy fit and can't stand the hospital. But Melanie, who is sweet and retiring and everything delicate, she's in the hospital day after day. So some women could do it, some women couldn't. Men worried about women being made hard, or and of course there were all sorts of other women who were around armies that might be seen as a bit harder than Melanie types. But you've got to remember too, think about the Midwest, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio in 1855. Those are not retiring women fluttering their fans. They're out there delivering cows and, slaughtering animals, delivering human babies. There was a physicality to life that the Civil War hospital did not exceed by all that much. And women did what had to be done. And if you had nursed at home, then you could nurse in the hospital. Often the women would talk about the soldier patients as their children. It was one way to get around this, walking up to a man you never met before and wiping his butt. I mean, that was a break. I mean, that was hard. So you had to create a kind of structure that said, I'm mom, they're children. Even if this man is 45 and I'm 23, the men would call them mother too. And so that helped make it easier. But it was a challenge. But it just, the alternative was the care wouldn't get given, and that was not acceptable. Now, Dorothea Dix worried about this. She organized the nursing corps in the Union Army, and she only wanted women over, I think, the age of 30, and she wanted them to be ugly and to wear plain clothes. And you see comments from people saying how much women aged all of a sudden. 25, 28 years old wanted to nurse. Suddenly she was 30. They went out and bought black dresses so they could get by Dorothea Dix. So there was that concern.
Okay. How much interference was there from the generals? Now there's the one quote about the complaining to General Sherman about Mary Livermore, and he says, "Well, I can't do anything. She outranks me."
Well, that's not Mary.
It's Mary Walker, I believe.
It's Mother Bickerdike.
Mother Bickerdike.
Sorry.
All three of them wrong twice. I get 3 strikes, right?
So
how universal is that?
Sherman did not like the female nurses at all. And one of the things to realize is Sherman is on the move. He's Army in the field, as opposed to fixed hospitals behind the lines, where women were more welcome, but often doctors didn't want them there. They didn't want to be bossed around by people in petticoats. Some doctors, you see, for example, there's a fight in St. Louis over whether female nurses are going to come in, and one of the doctors recognized their value and said, come on in, and the other doctors are being all snippy about it. And then they start to see that where the women nurses are, better care is happening, because the alternative would be to use male convalescent patients. Right. So you get a guy, and the Army was still trying to do this in the Spanish-American War. So a guy is just getting over being sick. He's barely up walking around. He provides care, when he gets around to it, to the other patients. He gets well enough and actually now trained enough to do his job, and he goes back to his regiment, and you start all over again. So the efficacy of women nurses starts to become obvious. People start getting used to it. So yeah, it varied in places. I think women were far less accepted on the road, if you will. and became far more accepted in the fixed hospitals.
Well, let's talk about that chapter that got out of hand. Became
Okay.
the other book, because there's this entire we're talking about, when we talk about women working in hospitals right now, we're thinking in terms of middle class or working class white women from behind the lines that come forward.
Right.
There's these huge refugee camps filled with freedmen and a lot of African American women coming to the refugee camps, and they find themselves in the middle of that. What role did black women serve in nursing, and is that restricted to USCT soldiers, or is it across the spectrum in the hospitals?
Okay, so to start with, a tenth of the Union Army by 1864 were black troops, and you run into the problem that some of the white women who were happy to take care of white troops were somewhat less, some of them were less comfortable taking care of black troops. In St. Louis, again, the same doctor I was just talking about, Ira Russell, realized that there were a lot of black women refugees in the St. Louis area. He had a lot of black troops that were sick. St. Louis was a mustering in point, and a lot of the soldiers, unfortunately, came in off the plantation. 75% of the Union colored troops came, which was their name, U.S. colored troops, were brought directly from plantations. They assemble in St. Louis and they promptly get sick. So he needed help, and so the obvious thing was hire the women out of the refugee camp. So he developed a training program for them to make them nurses, and it was just a natural thing. Now, the Southerners, most likely, if they even knew that was going on or were commenting about it, would have said, well, what's the problem? 75% of the nurses in Chimborazo Hospital in Richmond were black. They were the same slaves that had been taking care of white kids all their lives, and were doing all the kind of manual work in hospitals, cooking and cleaning, washing sheets, cleaning up the men, emptying chamber pots. So black workers were common in this, were expected in the South, even if they were slaves. In the North, you start to have paid nursing labor, and the beginning of at least the idea that nursing can be a job that these black women can do.
Mm-hmm.
How much it happened, say, in D.C., or in the big hospital clusters in the Northeast Corridor, I don't know.
Right.